Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we sift through the often dense academic research and corpus studies. We aim to give you the highest value intelligence you need to really master your field.
And today, we are getting into something absolutely crucial for advanced English.
Yeah, today we're tackling what is arguably the ultimate linguistic barrier. You know, the thing standing between advanced C1, C2 English learners and that feeling of true, undeniable native fluency. Phrasal verbs.
Phrasal verbs, or PVs, as we'll probably call them quite a bit. They look simple, don't they? Just a verb and a little particle, like a preposition or an adverb.
Right. Deceptively simple.
Exactly. Because their meaning, anything but simple. They really are the linguistic gatekeepers to sounding natural, to spontaneous English.
So our mission today, our deep dive, is to look hard at the sources, understand why they're so vital, why they're still so tricky, even for really good learners, and most importantly, figure out how you can systematically acquire them, master them, really.
And when we talk about vital, about necessity, well, the frequency is just off the charts.
It's almost alarming, isn't it? This isn't just about sounding a bit more, colloquial.
Not at all.
It's fundamental to understanding and actually participating in everyday conversation. The raw data, the sheer volume of PVs in native English, well, it makes them completely non-negotiable.
That's absolutely right. When linguists dig into corpus analysis, analyzing huge samples of real spoken informal English, the results are just stark.
How stark are we talking?
We're talking about one phrasal verb popping up roughly every 9.6 words.
They're doing 10 words or so.
Yeah, think about that. That kind of extreme frequency means PVs are absolutely integral to the structure, the flow of English as it's actually used, out there in the wild.
So if you don't master them, you're essentially missing, about 10% of the basic building blocks of everyday communication?
Pretty much. You're missing a huge chunk of how the language actually works in conversation.
And this leads directly to that core anxiety, doesn't it, for the advanced learner? Avoiding the dreaded talking like a book problem.
Oh,
You might have perfect grammar, a massive vocabulary full of complex, Latinate words.
Right. Words like commence, tolerate, investigate.
Yeah. But if you only rely on those formal alternative, you just end up sounding, stiff, overly precise, like a translation engine that hasn't quite warmed up yet.
The difference is just night and day. Imagine someone saying this, relying only on those formal single-word verbs. I arise at 7 a.m., commence my journey to work at 8, and am ready to begin the procedure of starting my computer by 9.
Ugh. It's technically correct, I suppose.
Technically, yes, but it uses this incredibly formal register. It just signals distance, You sound like you're not really part of the everyday native speaker community.
It sounds like an official police report from 1952 or something.
Exactly. Now compare that to the natural, PV-rich way we'd actually say it. I get up at 7 a.m., set off for work at 8, and I'm ready to log on by 9.
So much smoother. Instantly recognizable.
It's standard, modern, neutral English. It flows better, it's more efficient, and often it's actually more nuanced. That's a point we'll definitely dive into later.
Right.
The act of deliberately avoiding PVs, clinging to those single-word alternatives, well, it's the fastest way to sabotage your own fluency goals.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Starting with the biggest challenges. Because it is a bit of a mystery, isn't it?
Yeah.
If they're so common, why are C1 and C2 learners, people who've mastered complex conditionals, subjunctive clauses, all that tricky stuff, why are they still tripping up on these little 2- and 3-word units?
Well, the difficulty really stems from a combination of things. Cognitive traps, semantic traps, syntactic traps. It's a minefield.
Okay, where do we start?
The first one is the most intuitive hurdle, the one everyone hits first. The literal trap. Or, more technically, semantic opacity.
Ah, right. The natural impulse to just add the words together, like algebra. Verb A plus particle B should equal mus, meaning C. Simple.
If only.
Yeah.
But in English, A plus B often equals D or E or F or sometimes even G. It's not additive like that.
So give up.
Exactly. You see give and you see up. Your brain instinctively tries to combine the action of giving with the direction up, maybe handing something upwards.
Makes sense, literally.
But that's where the opacity hits you. Give up actually means quit or surrender or abandon. None of those meanings are literally present in the individual words give or up.
So the meaning is hidden, opaque.
Precisely. It's a consequence of language evolution, really. The verb and particle have fused together over time into a new single semantic unit. a chunk.
And the research is clear on this.
Very firm.
Right.
Our sources stress this. PVs must be learned as whole, indivisible semantic chunks. You can't decode them by translating the parts.
And it's not always completely opaque, is it? It's more like a scale.
That's a great point. Semantic opacity is definitely a sliding scale.
Yeah.
You have fully transparent PVs like fall down. The meaning is pretty obvious from the parts.
Fall plus down, fall down. Easy enough.
But crucially, the most common high-frequency PVs, the ones you hear constantly, are often the most opaque. Or worse, they're the most flexible in meaning.
Which brings us neatly to the second major hurdle, I guess.
It does indeed. The polysemy puzzle. Polysemy. That's just the fancy term for when one word or phrase has multiple distinct meanings.
Like bank can be a place for money or the side of a river.
Exactly. And phrasal verbs are notorious for this. Research shows that the really frequent PVs have, on average, somewhere between 5 and 6 distinct meaning senses.
5 or 6 meanings for one phrasal verb. Okay, I see the problem.
Think about a common one like take off. It can mean to remove clothes.
Take off your coat.
Or for a plane to
The
depart.
plane took off on time.
Or for a business to suddenly become successful.
Her new business really took off.
Or even just to suddenly leave a place, maybe in a hurry.
He saw the police and just took off.
4 very different meanings, all using take off.
Yeah, trying to memorize 5 or 6 seemingly random meanings for every single PV. Well, it sounds exhausting.
Yeah.
I can see why learners might just, throw their hands up and resort to avoidance.
It absolutely feels like an infinite, impossible learning task.
So how do you manage that?
Well, this is where the research gives you, the learner, a crucial aha moment, a way to manage that potentially overwhelming load.
Okay, I'm listening.
This insight comes from corpus-driven pedagogical lists, specifically work done creating the phrasal verb pedagogical list, or PAV list. They crunched the numbers on huge amounts of real language data.
And what did they find?
They found that, yes, a frequent PV might technically have, say, 6 different meanings listed in a dictionary, but if you prioritize learning just the top 2 most frequent meaning senses for each PV,
Just the main 2.
just the 2 senses that account for the vast majority of its actual real-world usage, you can cover approximately 3/4, 75% of all the times that PV appears in native speech.
Wow. 75% coverage just by focusing on the top 2 meanings instead of chasing all 6.
Exactly. That's an incredible efficiency boost. It means we can use big data, corpus linguistics, to turn what feels like an overwhelming mess into a systematic, manageable task.
Okay, that's genuinely useful. Prioritize the top 2 meanings based on frequency data. That makes the task feel finite, achievable.
Precisely. This methodology, rooted in large-scale frequency data from massive corpora like the Corpus of Contemporary American English, KOCA, gives us a clear pedagogical roadmap. Mastery isn't about memorizing every obscure, archaic meaning from the dictionary.
It's about securing the dominant 2 meanings to maximize your communicative bang for your buck, basically.
You got it. Maximize efficiency and coverage.
Right. Now let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about meaning. What about the mechanics, the grammar? Because the third pitfall you mentioned is purely structural, the syntactic maze of separability.
Ah, yes, separability.
And getting this wrong is arguably one of the most obvious red flags.
Yeah.
It really marks someone out as a learner, even a very advanced C1 learner trying to sound like a C2 speaker.
It absolutely does. This is all about where you can or must place the object in relation to the verb and its particle. There are basically 3 main types to worry about.
Okay, lay them out for us.
First, you have inseparable PVs. These act like a single block. Think of look after, meaning take care of. The object must come after the particle.
Example.
I look after my dog.
Yeah.
You can never, ever say, I look the dog after. The verb and particles stick together.
Simple enough. Look after plus object. Got it. What's next?
Then you have the separable PVs. These give you a bit more flexibility. Think turn off, meaning deactivate.
Okay.
With these, the object can go either after the particle, like turn off the light,
Uh-huh.
or it can go between the verb and the particle, turn the light off. Both are perfectly correct.
Any reason to choose one over the other?
Native speakers often tend to put the object in the middle, separating the verb and particle, especially when the object is short, like the light. Turn the light off feels slightly more natural to many than turn off the light, but both are fine.
Okay, so inseparable means object after, separable means object after or in the middle. But there's a catch, isn't there?
There's a huge catch. This is where C1, C2 learners often crash and burn. It's the mandatory rule that applies when the object is a pronoun like it, them, him, her, us.
Ah, The pronoun rule.
Yes. If the object is a pronoun, a separable PV becomes obligatorily separated. You must put the pronoun between the verb and the particle.
Give us an example.
Right. You can say, the light is on, please turn it off. The pronoun it must split turn it off.
And what can't you say?
You can never say, the light is on, please turn off it. That is grammatically incorrect and sounds immediately wrong to a native speaker.
Never turn off it. Always turn it off.
Always. This distinction is absolutely non-negotiable in English grammar. If you make the mistake of not separating a separable PV when the object is a pronoun, it instantly disrupts the listener's comprehension. It flags you as non-native, even if every other part of your sentence is perfect.
That level of detail, that specific rule, is exactly what C1 learners need to internalize to make that jump to C2. It really highlights that the PV isn't just a vocabulary item, it's a structural unit with its own strict rules for object placement.
And understanding these rules, or rather the fear of not understanding them, leads us directly to the final major challenge we identified. It's more of a behavioral issue. Avoidance behavior.
Right. Because PVs seem hard, because the meanings are tricky, because the grammar rules like separability are confusing. Learners often just default to what feels safer.
Exactly. They stick to the single word equivalents they learned earlier, often the more formal Latinate words.
It's a common coping strategy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if put up with is separable, or I can't quite remember if it means tolerate or maybe construct something, I'll just play it safe and use the word tolerate. Then I know I'm grammatically correct, at least.
It makes sense as a strategy. And studies, particularly on advanced learners whose first language doesn't really have a phrasal verb structure, like Hebrew speakers, for example, they clearly highlight this trend. These learners use formal alternatives like tolerate, investigate, commence far more often than native speakers would in similar neutral situations.
But the problem is, that safety net is actually a linguistic trap, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
Because it leads you straight back to sounding formal and stiff. If I tell my friend, I cannot tolerate the noise coming from your apartment, well...
It sounds like you're about to serve them a formal eviction notice.
Right. But if I say, look, I just can't put up with the noise anymore, that sounds like a normal human being expressing frustration.
Exactly. The consequence of avoidance is that your communication ends up sounding distant, maybe overly academic, or sometimes just plain old-fashioned.
And the crucial point here, which often gets missed, is that many PVs aren't just informal alternatives.
No, not at all. Phrasal verbs like break in, meaning enter illegally, or put away, store something, or fill up, make something full. These are often the most neutral, the most standard, the most unmarked ways to express these common ideas in everyday English.
So clinging to single-word alternatives doesn't necessarily make your speech better or more correct.
Often it makes it less natural and sometimes even less precise because you lose the specific nuance that the phrasal verb carries.
That distinction that PVs are frequently the standard neutral choice, not just some informal slang that's absolutely critical for advanced learners to grasp. Okay, we've set the stakes, we've identified the traps, opacity, polysemy, syntax avoidance. Now let's get practical. Let's turn to the necessary tools. We need to dive deep into a C1, C2 toolkit of essential phrasal verbs, focusing really heavily on their actual usage and context.
Right, and for this section, we've grouped the PVs thematically. Research suggests this actually helps with memory encoding and retrieval, linking associated concepts together. And we'll really spend some time on the context for each one, not just the definition.
Sounds good. What's the first theme?
Let's start with situations involving relationships, conflict, and how things change between people.
Okay. Where do we begin?
A really high-value verb for conflict resolution, or the lack of it, is back down.
Back down. Okay, what's the nuance here?
It means to retreat from a position you've taken or a demand you've made, usually in an argument or negotiation. It captures a very specific shift away from assertiveness.
So if someone is being really stubborn, but then they give in.
They back down. Yeah, look at the example. They've made their demands and they're not going to back down. That shows absolute stubbornness, total resolution.
And if you use a single word like concede or withdraw.
It just wouldn't carry the same weight. Concede is quite formal, quite neutral. Withdraw might fit, but back down implies that initial strong stance, that psychological element of resistance followed by yielding. It's often more emotional.
Got it. Okay, moving to social relationships, specifically romantic ones, the classics. Break up or split up.
Right, meaning to end a romantic relationship. And this is a great example of how PVs, even your synonyms, fit specific contexts. break up and split up are pretty much interchangeable here.
Like in the example, they split up last year, but then they got back together.
Exactly. But notice what happens next. They got back together. We use another PV for the reconciliation. English just relies on these PVs for describing the ups and downs of relationships. Trying to say they separated or they disbanded feels really unnatural, almost clinical in this context.
True. Okay, what about those unplanned meetings? Running into people.
For that, you need to bump into or run into. They mean the same thing. Meeting someone unexpectedly, completely by chance.
As in, I dran into an old friend from uni in the street yesterday.
Precisely. Now, you could just say, I met an old friend, but meet often implies it was planned, or at least doesn't specify. Using bump into or run into immediately signals that crucial element of surprise, of spontaneity.
That's a piece of information you'd lose if you just said met or used a really formal word like encountered.
Exactly. The PV adds that layer instantly.
Okay, going back to that avoidance trap we talked about.
Yeah.
The absolutely indispensable verb for tolerating something difficult or annoying. It has to be put up with. You basically can't sound like a normal human complaining without this one.
It really is the neutral standard choice when you're expressing that kind of low-grade frustration or just quiet endurance of something unpleasant. We often hear learners say things like, I cannot tolerate my noisy neighbor.
Yeah, sounds far too strong. Legalistic almost.
Right. Contrast that with, I'm just not going to put up with any more lateness from those kids. It's less formal, it feels more immediate, and it signals annoyance clearly without sounding overly dramatic or like you're writing an academic paper about it.
It captures that feeling of kind of passively enduring something until you snap.
And crucially, this PV is always inseparable. You put up with something, you never put something up with.
Got it. Put up with, plus the annoying thing. Finally, in this relationship theme.
Let's do get along or get on with. Both are very common.
Meaning?
They describe the quality of a relationship specifically, having a good, friendly relationship with someone. Like, I get along on really well with all my teachers. Or, do you get on with your new boss?
And the alternatives sound weird.
If you try to use a single word alternative like, I coexist harmoniously with my teachers, or I am sociable with my colleagues.
Okay, yeah. Point taken. Sounds robotic.
You immediately create that unnecessary formal distance. Get along or get on is just the standard, unmarked, normal way to talk about relational compatibility.
Right, let's move into the mental domain now. Thinking, ideas, information, and maybe consuming things too. You mentioned the verb come earlier, how it can be tricky.
Yes, come forms several high-value PVs that are really easy to confuse because they sound similar but mean very different things. We need to carefully contract come across, come up with, and come up.
Okay, let's break them down. Come across first.
Come across is all about accidental discovery, finding something or meeting someone purely by chance when you weren't looking for it. Like, I came across my old school books while I was clearing out the attic.
So the action feels passive. The discovery happened to you.
Exactly. You weren't actively searching. Compare that with come up with.
Okay, come up with.
This is about intentional creation or invention, suggesting an idea, finding a solution after thinking about it, like, I've come up with a great idea for our Halloween costumes, or she came up with a plan to save money.
So come across is finding by chance. Come up with is creating through thought.
Precisely. Notice the particle makes all the difference. Across suggests happening upon something spatially or conceptually. Up with suggests bringing something forth from your mind after effort. Radically different processes, accidental versus intentional, using the same root verb, come.
That's a perfect example of why you absolutely have to learn the whole chunk, not just the verb.
Okay, what about the third one? Just come up.
Come up has a different, almost passive quality again. It means for a topic or issue to be mentioned or to arise, often without anyone intentionally introducing it, like, the topic of a pay rise came up in my meeting with the boss. So it wasn't necessarily the boss or me who brought it up. It just emerged in the conversation.
Exactly. It arose. The topic came up. So come across, find by chance, come up with, invent, suggest, come up, Ariza Bay mentioned. 3 distinct, crucial meanings.
Got it. Okay, moving on. What about highlighting information, drawing attention to something?
For that, the key PV is point out. This is crucial for drawing attention to a specific detail, often something that was missed, mistaken, or needs correction.
Example.
At the end of the presentation, our boss pointed out several obvious mistakes we had made.
And how does that compare to just saying, the boss noted the mistakes or indicated the mistakes?
point out feels much more direct and conversational. It implies a specific action of highlighting something overlooked or problematic. Noted or indicated are more neutral, maybe more formal. Point out often implies correction or clarification.
Okay. Now, for goals related to reduction, maybe health or finance, you mentioned two useful contrasting verbs here. Cut down on and cut out.
Yes, they both involve reduction, but to different degrees. Cut down on means reducing the amount you consume or do something, lessening it, like, I really need to cut down on fast food, or he's trying to cut down on his screen time.
So it implies scaling back, a reduction, but not stopping completely.
Correct. Whereas cut out is much more drastic. It means eliminating something entirely, stopping completely, often because of a strong reason or necessity.
Like in the example, my doctor has told me I need to cut out all processed meats from my diet.
See the difference? Cut down on is reduce, cut out is eliminate. Using cut out emphasizes the total removal, the 100% stop. A single word like eliminate might capture that technically, but cut out does it in a much more common everyday register, especially when talking about food or habits.
Right. Good distinction. And finally in this theme, a massively versatile PV, workout.
Hugely polysemous, this one. It means to do physical exercise, of course. I work out at the gym 3 times a week. Very common.
But that's usually not the one C1, C2 learners struggle with. What's the other key meaning?
The other really functional meaning, vital for communication, is to think about something and find a solution, or to understand something complex or confusing. Problem solving, basically.
Like the police example.
Yeah. The police couldn't work out how the burglars got into the house. Here, work out means figure out, solve, or determine.
And if you just use determine?
The police couldn't determine how. It sounds a bit stiff, maybe like a written report again. Workout is the standard natural choice for the mental process of solving a puzzle or figuring something out. Can you work out this math problem? I can't work out what he means.
We should probably also briefly touch on a related meaning. Slightly different, but also common turnout. As in, it turned out that the burglars came through the window.
Ah, good point. Yes. Workout implies the process of finding the answer. Turnout often describes the final result or how a situation develops, sometimes unexpectedly. We were worried, but everything turned out fine in the end.
That subtle difference, actively working something out versus how it passively turns out, that's a perfect example of the kind of precision PVs offer, isn't it?
It really is.
Okay, our final theme focuses on action, taking responsibility and the results or consequences of actions. Where do we start here?
Let's begin with a fundamental one. Look after. Meaning simply to take care of someone or something that needs attention or protection.
Like the example, I can't come out tonight. I need to look after my baby brother. Or, could you look after my bag for a minute?
Exactly. And we absolutely must reinforce the grammar rule here again. Look after is completely inseparable.
Right. You cannot split look and after with the object, no matter how long the object is.
Never. You are looking after the baby brother. You are never looking the baby brother after. It needs to be learned and used as a solid 3-word unit. Look, plus after, plus object.
Cemented in your brain. Got it. Next.
A fantastic PV for expressing injustice or, well, escaping punishment. Get away with.
This one has a negative feel, doesn't it?
Definitely. It means to do something wrong or illegal and not be caught or punished for it. Like, he stole 10 euros from his mom's purse and got away with it because she blamed his brother instead.
It carries that very specific connotation of escaping deserved punishment.
Mm-hmm. Single word options like escape consequences or avoid penalty just don't capture that specific nuance of unfairness or succeeding in deceit quite so succinctly and naturally.
Okay. Then there's payoff.
Mm-hmm.
This one seems more positive. It has 2 key meanings.
Yes, 2 extremely common, usually positive meanings. The first is quite literal, finishing paying money that you owe, usually a large debt.
Like the example, they finally managed to pay off the mortgage on the house after 25 years.
Right. That's standard financial language. Pay off a loan, pay off a mortgage.
But the other meaning, the more figurative one, is also really high value, isn't it?
Absolutely. This is when persistent effort, hard work, or patience finally yields a positive result or success. Like, she studied incredibly hard and got into Oxford University. All of her hard work has really paid off.
It implies its successful culmination after a period of struggle or investment.
Exactly. That connection between the effort put in and the positive result achieved is beautifully captured by paid off. If you just said, her hard work resulted positively, it sounds clunky and loses that specific flavor of deserved success after effort.
Makes sense. Okay, next one is crucial for work and responsibility contexts. take on.
Yes, take on means to accept or decide to do a new task, challenge, or responsibility. It can also mean to employ someone, to hire them.
Like in the example, she's taken on a lot of extra responsibilities in her new job, or the company's taking on 50 new staff.
It implies actively accepting or assuming the duty or the challenge, rather than just passively receiving it. You take on work, you take on a challenge.
And related to that, but different, is takeover.
Right. Takeover means to assume control of something, often from someone else, like a business, a department, a role, or even just a task.
Example, a new manager has taken over the department.
If you just said a new manager now controls the department, it might sound a bit harsh, maybe suggesting a dictatorship. Takeover implies a more standard transition of responsibility and authority. It's much more neutral.
And these two verbs, take on, accepting new things, and take over, assuming control from others, are basically the standard vocabulary for describing changes in roles and responsibilities, especially in organizations.
They really are essential for professional communication.
Okay, that deep dive into the usage and context of these specific PVs is incredibly helpful. It really drives home the precision they offer. But it brings us right back to that underlying puzzle. Why does a C1, even a C2 learner, who is clearly sophisticated enough to understand these nuances when they're pointed out, still struggle so profoundly with actually acquiring and using them consistently? If they are so frequent, shouldn't just passive exposure, listening and reading, be enough over time?
Yeah, you'd think so, wouldn't you? But unfortunately, the research suggests that passive exposure alone just isn't enough for achieving real productive mastery, especially when you factor in those traps like polysemy. The data confirms a pretty significant knowledge gap, even at advanced levels.
How significant are we talking?
Well, studies specifically measuring advanced learners, often university students aiming for high levels of fluency, showed that they knew, on average, only about 40% of the tested meaning senses of common PVs at a productive level.
Only 40%. Wait, let's clarify productive level. That means not just understanding the PV when they see or hear it.
Correct. Productive mastery means being able to actually produce the correct PV accurately in conversation or writing when the meaning is needed. So thinking of and using put up with when you want to express tolerate annoyance.
So a 60% gap in being able to actually use these core vocabulary items. That's massive for learners who are otherwise considered advanced.
It is indeed. It clearly demonstrates that receptive knowledge, understanding them, when you encounter them, far, far outstrips productive knowledge, being able to use them yourself spontaneously and accurately.
And what about the polysemy issue? Did the studies look at whether learners knew all the meanings of a single PV?
They did, and the sources highlighted something quite stark there too. Because of polysemy, there was only about a 20% chance, 1 in 5, that any given advanced learner would actually know all the various tested meaning senses attached to a single frequent phrasal verb.
So they might know one meaning of takeoff, like the plane departing, but probably not the other 3 or 4 common meanings, like removing clothes or a business succeeding.
Exactly. They have partial knowledge, which isn't enough for flexible, fluent communication.
Okay, so clearly we can't just rely on luck or linguistic osmosis. We absolutely need a targeted, systematic approach to learning these things.
Precisely. Which leads us to strategy 1. Prioritize and systematize. You simply cannot learn thousands of PVs and all their meanings randomly. The learning load is just too massive. You must manage it intelligently using frequency data.
So stop grabbing random lists off the internet.
Pretty much. Don't study PVs haphazardly. Focus on the ones that give you the most mileage. Studies, particularly those that resulted in well-known lists like Lou's list of essential PVs, have identified roughly the 150 most frequent and functionally useful phrasal verbs in general English.
Okay, so step 1 for you, the C1, C2 learner listening, is to find a reliable, corpus-based list of these top 150 or so PVs, like the PHAV list we mentioned, which uses data from the huge COSCA corpus. And focus your energy exclusively on those 150 items first.
That's step 1. And step 2, as we discussed earlier, is leveraging that polysemy shortcut. For each of those 150 high-frequency verbs, prioritize learning their top 2 dominant meaning senses, the 2 that cover the bulk of real-world usage.
Right, the 75% coverage rule.
Exactly. By being systematic, data-driven, you ensure your precious study time yields the greatest possible communicative return in real-world conversations and texts. It's essentially an act of smart resource management for your brain.
Okay, prioritize the top 150 PVs and their top 2 meanings. Makes sense. Now, the second strategy involves how we actually go about learning them. And this seems to challenge some traditional language teaching ideas. The learning method debate, root versus context.
Yes, this is interesting. The traditional pedagogical wisdom, what you often see in textbooks, is that complex, high-involvement learning tasks are always better.
What counts as high involvement?
Things like trying to guess the meaning of a new PV from a dense paragraph of context, or being asked to write 5 original sentences using the new PV immediately after learning it. The idea is that the cognitive effort involved leads to deeper processing and therefore better memory retention.
That's logical. More effort equals better learning.
It sounds logical. However, that assumption was directly challenged by some of the research we looked at for this deep dive. The studies actually showed that simple, focused rote memorization tasks, things like just using flashcards to explicitly link the form, example, take off, to a specific meaning, for example, depart it, were found to be just as effective for the initial stage of form meaning acquisition as those more elaborate, time-consuming contextual tasks.
Wait, hold on. Just as effective. So you're saying simple flashcards are as good as writing sentences or guessing from context. That seems counterintuitive. If I just wrote memorize, give up, quit, I'm not learning the nuance, the context, the formality level, or crucial things like whether it's separable or not. Are you really suggesting we should just ditch contextual learning?
No, that's a very important clarification. It's not about ditching context entirely. It's about understanding the difference between initial acquisition, just getting the basic form meaning link into your head, and long-term application and integration.
Okay, explain that difference.
For that very first step, the simple foundational task of encoding the basic link between the PV's form and one of its core meanings into your long-term memory, the focused rote method seems to work just as well as more complex methods, and crucially, it's often much faster.
Faster
because it minimizes the cognitive load at that specific initial stage. Those high-involvement tasks force your brain to juggle multiple things at once. Understand the context, generate grammatically correct sentences, and learn the new vocabulary item all simultaneously. That's demanding.
Right.
If you separate the process first, efficiently establish that basic form meaning link using a low-load method like rote learning or flashcards, and then in a separate activity, focus on practicing it in context, figuring out the grammar rules like separability, exploring nuance, you might actually save significant time overall.
Oh, okay. So it's more about efficiency for that first encoding step. Establish the basic connection quickly with rote, then spend your high involvement time on practice, application, and mastering the usage rules.
Exactly. It's a potential time-saving technique, especially given how many PVs you need to learn. Maximize efficiency for initial encoding, then focus your quality time on contextual application.
That makes more sense. Whether you use rote learning or contextual tasks initially, this leads directly to the next strategy, which seems absolutely critical regardless of method. Strategy 3, the crucial role of recycling. Because even if rote learning is efficient initially, it carries a big risk, doesn't it?
A huge risk. Rapid forgetting, memory decay.
And the attrition data you mentioned earlier is genuinely frightening here.
It really is. Researchers consistently observe very high attrition rates for newly learned vocabulary, especially PVs. One study found that on the level of meaning recall, just remembering what the PV meant, learners lost a staggering 57% of their knowledge just 1 week after the initial learning session.
57%. So more than half of the PVs they thought they'd learned were just gone in only 7 days.
Gone from accessible memory, yes. That means that a single encounter, one class, one worksheet, even one really intensive study session, no matter how well-designed or engaging it was, is functionally almost useless for long-term, stable PV mastery.
You basically haven't learned it if you only encounter it once.
Pretty much. The knowledge must be constantly revisited, recycled, and reinforced to fight that natural, rapid forgetting curve.
So what does that mean practically for the learner?
It means C1, C2 learners absolutely need to build systematic spaced repetition into their PV study routine. If you learn a batch of, say, 10 or 20 PVs today using your chosen method,
Flashcards or sentence writing, whatever.
you then need a schedule to review them again. Maybe tomorrow, then again in 3 days, then again in 7 days, then maybe 2 weeks later, then a month later. The intervals get progressively longer.
And that repeated retrieval strengthens the memory trace.
Exactly. It pushes the knowledge from fragile short-term memory into more stable, durable long-term memory, making it available for productive use when you need it. Recycling through spaced repetition systems like Anki, Quizlet, or even just a manual calendar system is the absolute non-negotiable step that must follow initial acquisition.
Okay, prioritize, Maybe use rote for initial speed, but definitely recycle constantly. What else? Our final strategy seems to look beyond dedicated study time, suggesting your leisure time might actually be your most powerful tool. Strategy 4. Beyond the classroom L2 engagement.
Yes. We already know that corpus frequency predicts knowledge to some extent. The more common a PV is in the language, the more likely you are to eventually learn it just through exposure. But the studies found something more specific and powerful. The single most significant predictors of advanced PV knowledge weren't just any exposure, but high levels of L2 engagement specifically, engagement in leisure activities.
So what you choose to do in your free time in English matters immensely for PV acquisition.
Immensely. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because the research showed that not all types of L2 leisure activities correlated equally strongly with PV mastery, there were clear winners.
Okay, what kind of activities really boost PV knowledge?
The studies found that the amount of time spent actively reading in English, things like books, magazines, newspapers, websites, and time spent social networking in English, actively using platforms like Facebook, Twitter, forums, or English language chat programs to communicate, these were the most significant predictors of superior phrasal verb knowledge among advanced learners.
Reading and social networking, that's specific. What about other common immersion activities, like watching movies or listening to music?
Interestingly, passively watching films or TV shows or just listening to English music did not correlate nearly as strongly with productive PV knowledge.
Why the difference? Why would reading and interactive texting be better for learning PVs than watching a TV show packed with them?
The answer seems to lie in the nature of the processing involved, the speed and the modality.
How so? Reading is generally slower, right? You control the pace.
Exactly. Reading is visual and self-paced. This allows time for what linguists sometimes call developing sight vocabulary for multi-word units, because PVs like put up with or look after or come across are multi-word expressions. The advanced learner needs to train their brain to recognize that sequence of words as a single semantic chunk instantly, as one item, without having to mentally pause and break it down each time.
Like recognizing a single long word.
Precisely. Reading, being visual, and allowing you to reread or pause gives your brain the repeated exposure and the processing time needed to strengthen that visual form-meaning link. It helps you start to see put up with as one block, one unit.
And passive listening, like watching a film.
It's often just too fast. The constant, rapid flow of natural speech can overwhelm the brain's ability to segment the stream, identify those specific multi-word units, and consolidate them, especially if they contain less familiar PVs. You hear it, maybe understand the gist from context, but it washes over you too quickly to solidify the PV itself.
Okay, that makes sense for reading. What about social networking? Why was that so effective?
Social networking, especially text-based interaction, hits a sweet spot. First, it provides massive exposure to informal, natural, contemporary language, exactly the register where PVs thrive. You see how people really use them. Second, it's interactive. You're not just passively receiving. You often need to produce language, including PVs, to participate, often quickly.
So it forces you to retrieve and use them in a realistic context.
Exactly. It combines frequent exposure in a relevant context with the active production demands that help solidify knowledge.
So the clear strategy emerging from the research is, if you want to master phrasal verbs, you need to significantly increase your volume of active reading in English and consciously choose to use English actively in your online social interactions. These habits provide the most fertile ground for training your brain to recognize, internalize, and ultimately use those crucial high-frequency phrasal verbs.
That's what the data strongly suggests. It's about creating an environment, even in your leisure time, that constantly reinforces these vital linguistic units. #outro comfort.
Okay, we've covered a huge amount of ground there. Why phrasal verbs are so critical for C1, C2 fluency, the major hurdles learners face, a toolkit of essential PVs with context, and crucially, these research-backed strategies for actually mastering them. Let's quickly summarize the key takeaways for everyone listening.
Right. Takeaway number 1. Phrasal verbs are absolutely non-negotiable. They are incredibly pervasive in everyday conversation, remember? Roughly 1 every 10 words spoken. If you avoid them, you risk sounding stiff, formal, and distant. So job 1 is to ditch that talking like a book trap.
Takeaway 2. You have to change your learning mindset. Stop trying to translate PVs literally word by word. Learn them as complete semantic chunks. And pay meticulous attention to the grammar, especially separability. Internalize that rule about pronouns always splitting separable PVs, like turn it off, never turn off it. Get that wrong, and it's a major flag.
Third, maximize your learning efficiency by prioritizing ruthlessly. Focus your initial efforts on the 150 or so most frequent phrasal verbs identified by corpus research, maybe using something like the PHAVE list, and for each of those, concentrate on mastering their top 2 dominant meaning senses first. This targeted approach gives you massive coverage, maybe 75% for much less effort than trying to learn everything.
Fourth takeaway, be smart about how you study and fight the forgetting curve. For that initial form meaning link, simple intentional learning methods like focused rote memorization or flashcards can be very time efficient. But because research shows you'll forget over half of what you learned within a week, that staggering 57% attrition rate, you must build systematic recycling, like spaced repetition, into your long-term learning schedule. Review, review, review.
And finally, takeaway 5. Leverage your leisure time strategically. Boost your L2 exposure where the research shows it counts most for PV acquisition. That means significantly increasing your active reading volume in English books, articles, websites, and actively using English in your text-based social networking and online communication. These activities seem to be more effective than passive listening for building the site vocabulary and contextual understanding needed for true productive mastery of PVs.
So it's a combination of focused study, smart prioritization, constant recycling, and targeted real-world engagement. Now, this entire deep dive really challenges the sort of historical bias against phrasal verbs, doesn't it? We know that the famous, perhaps apocryphal story about Sir Winston Churchill. He supposedly hated the prescriptive grammar rule against ending a sentence with a preposition, which often involves phrasal verbs. He famously, grumpily rewrote a sentence to avoid it, saying, "This is the kind of tedious nonsense up with which I will not put."
Right. His struggle perfectly reflects that old prescriptive view, the idea that phrasal verbs are somehow messy, illogical, or inherently informal and thus bad grammar, especially in writing.
But given that modern corpus analysis, looking at billions of words of real language, consistently shows that these phrasal verbs, common ones like break in, fill up, get along, put up with, work out, are often the most neutral, the most specific, and simply the most common way to express essential ideas in contemporary English, particularly in speech. Well, maybe it's time for advanced learners to fundamentally shift their perspective.
Should C1, C2 learners actively reject that lingering historical notion that PVs are just informal substitutes for better single words?
And instead, should you, the listener, fully recognize that PVs often provide specific, crucial, contextual nuances that their single-word Latinate equivalents simply cannot replicate without sounding overly formal, overly stiff, or just plain unnatural in many situations.
So here's our final provocative thought for you to take away and mull over. If phrasal verbs are frequently the most normal, the most standard, and often the most precise linguistic tool available for a particular idea in everyday English, what stiff single-word alternatives are you still clinging to, perhaps out of habit, or fear of making a mistake with the PV's form or grammar? And what essential meaning, what crucial nuance, or what natural conversational rhythm are you potentially sacrificing by not fully embracing the phrasal verb toolkit as a core component of your advanced English fluency? Okay, so if you're really pushing for fluency in English, you eventually run smack into this feature that just seems to separate the really natural speakers from those who, sound a bit like they're reading a textbook. I'm talking about phrasal verbs. They're kind of the essential linguistic hurdle, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They are famously, notoriously difficult for learners.
Yeah.
And it's not just because they're, combinations of words. It's often because they seem to break the rules you thought you'd learn.
Right.
But you've hit the nail on the head. If your goal is that natural, fluid communication, the kind you hear every day in real time, you simply have to get comfortable with them. Phrasal verbs are just everywhere in informal spoken English.
So our mission today is all about efficiency. We're aiming for a data-driven approach. We're diving into some pretty cutting-edge applied linguistics research, looking at massive frequency data, the kind compiled into these pedagogical lists to give you a shortcut.
A shortcut.
We'll unpack exactly why they're so tricky, point out the most common mistakes learners make, and this is the key part, show you where to focus your effort using that data. We want to reveal the critical meanings you absolutely need to prioritize to get the, biggest bang for your buck study-wise.
Makes sense.
Okay, let's break it down then. So, at the most basic level, what is a phrasal verb? It's a verb plus a particle, right? Like go through, and it works like a single unit, a single block of meaning and grammar.
That's it. And the surprising thing is just how often they appear in native speech. It's pretty startling. When we look at these huge language databases, these corporal, like the British National Corpus, which has millions and millions of words of real English, well, we find that phrasal verbs, as a category, are so common they can actually pop up more often overall than words you'd think are absolutely fundamental, like the verb are, or even the determinant of this.
Wow, more than are or this, that really puts it into perspective. That level of frequency means you just can't avoid them. Does that maybe explain why learners sometimes struggle even to, notice them in fast conversation?
Definitely. Yeah, that's a big part of it. And the main sort of cognitive challenge comes down to something called polysemy. Now, that sounds technical, but all it means is that one single phrasal verb, the same 2 or 3 words, can have multiple, sometimes completely different meanings depending on the context.
Okay, polysemy, multiple meanings.
And the data is quite striking here. The 100 most frequent English phrasal verbs, they have, on average, something like 5 to 6 separate meaning senses each.
5 or 6. Okay, so if I'm a student, I'm not just learning one thing when I learn, say, get over. I'm potentially learning 5 or 6 different ideas all bundled into those same 2 words. That's a heavy learning load. Can you give us an example that really shows this burden in action?
Sure. Let's take a really common one, like bring up. It seems simple, right? But when you learn it, you've got to get your head around several distinct meanings pretty quickly. First, there's the literal one. Can you bring up the tools from the basement? Carry them upwards.
Okay, simple enough. Carry up.
Then, completely different, you have the meaning nurture or educate, usually about raising a child. My grandma brought me up after my parents moved away.
Yeah.
Totally separate idea.
Right, raise a child. Got it.
And then there's a third really common one, mention or introduce a topic. Like, the topic of a pay rise came up in my meeting.
Ah, okay. And you used came up there, another phrasal verb meaning mention. And yeah, you definitely can't translate came up literally in that sentence. If you try to figure out why come plus up means mention, you're just going to be confused. So if they cause this much confusion, why are they so central to English? Why do native speakers lean on them so heavily? What's the functional advantage?
It really comes down to speed and cognitive efficiency. Think of phrasal verbs as these ready-made chunks, these formulaic sequences. We often speak incredibly fast, anywhere from 150 to maybe 300 words per minute.
Yeah, it can be really fast.
And we can only really manage that kind of speed because our brains retrieve these entire chunks from memory. We're not usually building sentences word by tiny word. We're grabbing these ready-made linguistic Lego bricks like look after or put off as whole units. It just allows for much faster, smoother processing and speaking.
That makes a lot of sense, the retrieval speed idea. It lets the speaker kind of bypass analyzing every single word grammatically and just deploy the whole concept instantly.
Precisely. Now, let's switch gears a bit and talk about the common pitfalls, the things that really stop learners from getting that fluency. The first big mistake, and we see this all the time in learner studies, is trying to translate literally, word for word.
Right, like we just saw with bring up or come up.
Exactly. Since the meaning of the whole phrase is very rarely just the sum of its parts, trying to translate literally is, well, it's usually a recipe for frustration.
It's like trying to figure out give up. If you know give and you know up, it doesn't help you understand why it means quit.
Perfect example. The research is really clear on this. The best way, the most effective way, is to learn the phrasal verb as a single chunk of meaning. Don't try to break it down.
Treat it as one vocabulary item. Okay. What's the next big hurdle?
The second major one is the syntax, the grammar side of things. Specifically, the separability issue. This trips up a lot of people. Basically, not all phrasal verbs behave the same way grammatically when you have an object.
Ah, yeah. This is where it feels like guesswork sometimes. Can you simplify how we should think about them?
Okay, yeah. For practical purposes, think of 2 main types you'll encounter constantly. First, you've got the separable ones. With these, the object can slot right into the middle, or it can go at the end. Both sound fine. Classic example. Turn off the light.
Right. Or turn the light off. Both okay.
Both. Perfectly natural. But then you have the inseparable phrasal verbs, and with these, you cannot put the object in the middle. If you try to split them, it just sounds wrong, really unnatural. Think of look after. You say look after your dog.
You can't say look the dog after.
Exactly. Never look the dog after. Knowing which ones are which is just crucial to avoid sounding like, well, like you learned it from a grammar book exercise.
That separability thing is definitely key. But let's look beyond just the grammar rules for a second. Phrasal verbs often carry this extra layer of meaning, don't they? Something beyond the basic definition. They add nuances that maybe a single word equivalent misses. It's not just formal versus informal, is it?
No, it's much more than that. Connotation is huge. It's often the difference between sounding, perfectly correct, but maybe a bit neutral or flat, and sounding truly like a native speaker who gets the subtle flavors of the language.
Yeah.
Let's take the idea of delaying something. You could use the formal verb, postpone, totally neutral. We postpone the meeting, fine.
Okay, neutral.
But if you use the phrasal verb put off, like I've been putting off this report, it often adds a feeling of, reluctance, maybe procrastination, maybe even slight annoyance.
Okay. So the company postponed the merger. Sounds serious, professional. But I've been putting off calling the dentist for weeks. That putting off definitely carries that feeling of avoidance, maybe laziness. The phrasal verb brings the emotion in.
That's a great way to put it. It brings the emotion. Another really good example is come by. Now, literally, it can just mean obtain or get, but often, especially in questions, it carries this subtle hint of difficulty or maybe effort or sometimes even a little suspicion. So if someone says, I wonder how you came by all that money, they're sort of implying the way you got it might be questionable, or at least wasn't straightforward.
That's fascinating. Yeah, if I just said, I wonder how he obtained that money, it's just a plain question. But came by gives it that slight edge, like you're investigating. And the source material also mentioned tell off, meaning to scold someone. It's that has a sort of childish feel.
It really does. Yeah, absolutely. You wouldn't typically hear a manager say, right, I told off my assistant for being late. It sounds a bit parental. They'd more likely use reprimanded or had a word with. Tell off immediately makes you think of like a teacher talking to a student or a parent to a child.
Okay, so this leads to a really important point, a correction maybe, in how we should approach learning them. We often get taught that phrasal verbs are just the informal alternatives to more formal single words, but that's not always accurate, is it?
No, it's actually quite misleading sometimes. In many, many cases, the phrasal verb is the completely neutral, standard, everyday way to express an idea. Think about things like break into a house or put away your clothes or fill up your car with gas. These aren't particularly informal. They're just normal.
They're the default.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Often it's more accurate to think of the single word alternative like ascend instead of go up, or extinguish instead of put out as being the more formal or literary choice, not the other way around.
That's a really helpful reframing. Okay, so we have this massive challenge of polysemy, one verb, multiple meanings. You mentioned go on potentially having over 20 dictionary entries. How on earth does a learner cope with that? How do you avoid just being completely overwhelmed and actually focus your energy effectively?
Yeah, and that's where this corpus-based linguistics research really comes to the rescue. It provides genuinely the ultimate learning shortcut. It moves you away from trying to memorize every single definition in a massive dictionary. We can talk about things like the PAVE list, that stands for Phrasal Verb Pedagogical List. These lists are built purely on frequency data. Which verbs and which meanings of those verbs actually get used most often in the real world?
Okay. So this is the answer to that feeling of drowning in information. What's the sort of efficiency breakthrough that this research offers?
Well, the breakthrough is pretty stunning, actually. It lets you tackle the complexity very strategically. The analysis consistently shows that for the most frequent phrasal verbs, the ones you'll hear and need the most, you typically only need to really master, on average, 2 meaning senses. Just 2.
Only 2 meanings.
On average, yes. And mastering just those top 2 meanings is usually enough to understand around 3/4, 75% of all the times that specific phrasal verb appears in real-world English.
Wow, 75% coverage just by focusing on the top 2 meanings. That's a huge return on investment for your study time.
Isn't it? It's massive. So instead of spending hours trying to learn, say, 22 different subtle meanings for go on, many of which are quite rare.
Right.
You laser focus on the top 2 most frequent ones first. Get those down solid. This kind of systematic, data-driven approach means you immediately maximize your understanding and your ability to use the verb correctly in most situations you'll actually encounter. It's just smart studying.
Okay, that really clarifies the strategy. Don't try to be a walking dictionary. Be smart about frequency. Target the high-frequency verbs themselves, learn them as whole chunks, and crucially, prioritize those top 2 or 3 meanings based on the actual data.
Precisely. And, we want to help you put this strategy into action right away. So to help you do that, we've actually compiled a pretty comprehensive list of essential C1 level phrasal verbs. These are pulled directly from the research, And the list includes short, memorable examples that focus specifically on those high-frequency meanings we've been talking about.
Oh, fantastic. And you can actually download this entire deep dive, including that complete list of high-frequency phrasal verbs with their examples right now. Just check the description below this recording.
Absolutely. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on more deep dives and expert analysis like this one. Now, just to give you a little taste, a sort of sneak peek, let's quickly run through a few of those really essential phrasal verbs you should probably prioritize. We use short phrases to kind of anchor the main meaning.
Okay, sounds good. Let's do a quick round. Back down. That's like stopping demanding something, right? He had to back down.
Yeah, exactly. Or breakdown usually means stop working. My car always breaks down.
Got it. We talked about this one. Raising or educating a child. My grandma brought me up.
That's the key meaning. Bump into or run into, meet someone unexpectedly. I ran into Sarah yesterday.
Cheer up makes someone happier. Let's try and cheer him up.
Come across, find something by chance. I came across this old photo.
Count on means to rely on someone. You can count on me.
Cut down on reduce how much you consume. I need to cut down on sugar.
Get along or get on, have a good relationship. Do you get on with your boss?
Look after, take care of someone or something. Can you look after my plants?
Look down on, feel you're superior to someone. He looks down on people without degrees.
Look forward to feel happy about the future. I'm looking forward to the holiday.
Pay back, return money. I'll pay you back next week.
Pick up, collect someone, usually in a car. Can you pick me up from the station?
Put off, postpone. We mentioned this. Let's put off the decision.
Set off, start a journey. We set off early.
Show off, trying to impress people, maybe annoyingly. Stop showing off.
Take off for a plane leaving the ground. The plane took off on time.
Tell off. Speak angrily to someone, like a child. The teacher told them off.
And work out, this one has two common ones. Find a solution. We need to work out this problem or do exercise. I work out 3 times a week.
Great list. And remember, the full version with more examples is waiting for you in the download.
Exactly. Now, we've talked today about how knowing phrasal verbs is really strongly connected to fluency, but the research also points to something else quite interesting. Your knowledge of these verbs is also strongly linked to how much time you spend doing L2 leisure activities. Things like reading native content online or books and engaging in social networking in English.
Okay, so it's not just about study, it's about exposure through activities you might enjoy anyway.
Right. So the final thought to leave you with is this. Knowing that connection between exposure, especially through leisure, and mastering these crucial chunks of language, how could you maybe pivot some of your downtime this week? How could you slightly change your habits to increase that natural exposure and maybe accelerate your learning of these essential phrasal verbs?
Something to think about. We'll leave that with you. Until next time.